I want to introduce you to James Clements. James Clements is brought to us by Oxford University Press. He's an expert in primary education. At this moment, he's the creative director of Shakespeare and More. Ample experience in what's got to do with literacy in primary. So thank you for joining us on this very short impromptu invitation.
Thank you, Matt.
So thank you. Thank you very much. First question. We are going to go with the talker of the group. Yes? And that's Judy. Judy, if we were to think about what the school would look like, how these ideas would materialize, as regards students as protagonists and motivated students, what would this look like in a school if we really cared for this?
To me, we've all seen that. It exists. It's called preschool, it's kindergarten, it's the curiosity, the interest-driven, it's trying things, they don't work, no problem. If someone knocks over their blocks, it's not the end of the world. They have empathy, they have compassion, they build it again. So following the model that they come to us with, and we see the brain really wants to learn. Yeah, for survival, but it likes its dopamine. So it would look like kindergarten, the passion, the curiosity, and we're the facilitators.
Thank you. Will, how do you imagine it? How do you see it?
I find that a really hard question to answer because I've seen so many examples in so many different places that there's cultural differences, there's differences in vision, there's differences in the people who are part of that community. Perhaps the one thing that they have all in common is a kind of a living, breathing belief and authenticity in what they're doing. And conjoined with that is a power relationship where there's respect and freedom between teachers and pupils. There's a feeling of we're in this together, and there's one question I ask myself when I go into schools is this a school of compliance or a school of commitment? For me, the difference is between a grape and a raisin. You know, you walk into that school, and if you get the sense that people are doing it because they have to, we've got grades and tests to chase, we've been told by the government to do all of this sort of stuff, there's a feeling of, yeah, we'll do it, but we've got to. Mm-hmm. I think in a place which has got its own heart and vision, agreed amongst itself, and unique to that community, I don't believe in this sort of one-size-fits-all thing. It's got to adapt and come from the hearts of the people who are there, the kids, the parents, the teachers, the community. If they've got a clear, shared understanding of what we're after, then it's coming from the heart. You get commitment, and that's a very different feeling in a school. And it's that energy that allows them to take that evolutionary journey from having to do what we're told into where can this go? And what's lovely is seeing the variety in which that expresses itself. So I think the starting point has to be about the motivation for why we're doing this. And if you like, schools talk about having a vision, and they sort of we want all children to be massively confident. And I had one discussion with a school, and they were talking about their vision, and they had a discussion about, we want all children to go beyond their potential. And we had to have a little discussion about that's impossible. And how would you know what their potential is? So it's got to be a real, meaningful earth vision, which we as a community want to achieve. I think that's pretty much it.
I thought that the Lego bricks was a very simple idea, but powerful. And many teachers approach me because everyone has got Lego. If not Lego, you've got bricks at school. And it really gives order, boost, invites for real participation. So I really discussed with some other attendants, and it was a very simple activity, but could bring in a concrete, I think it's a concrete activity that can really trigger lots of independent, I would say, thinking and discussions. And James, what do you think about this?
Hello. Hey, it works this time. Brilliant. Oh, it does now. If you're wondering, this is not Guy Claxton with the dyed hair. I'm someone different. There you go. So my kind of main area of research is language and English teaching and reading and writing. So maybe I could take an example from that. And I always think with the field of kind of English and with books and literature and text, there's always a kind of slight tension between what I want to do, which is give children choice and give them voice, and also kind of my knowledge and the school's knowledge of kind of books that are going to open new worlds to them and introduce them to new ideas. There's always this kind of slight tension between me thinking, I want them to choose, but also I want them to read this because it's amazing and it's brilliant. And if I give them a free choice, they might not get to read that or get to do it. So there's always this kind of slight kind of tightrope to walk in between the two. There's something that's very popular in the UK at the moment, which is very nice, which seems like a nice kind of example of something like this, is a lot of schools teachers run with their classes, they run what's called a Book World Cup. So to decide which book they're going to study or which they're going to look at, they choose maybe 8 books that they think are going to be great. And then the children run a round of 16, and then they run semi-finals and a quarter-final. So each vote sort of knocks a book out, and you're left with a winner at the end that the children kind of mostly wanted to read. The teacher has got to pick all of the books beforehand, so you know they're going to be great, interesting, wonderful books. And then, of course, once you've got that, you've got one book you're going to read together as a class, and then you end up with, 7 other books or 15 other books that are there in the classroom. If someone voted for theirs and they didn't get their choice through, then they get to pick it up and read it in a group with their friends or whatever it might be. So their choices are kind of still valued, but they kind of have this ownership of things. So I suppose little things like that, perhaps.
Choice. Choice has always been very good.
And respecting their choice, I think.
And respecting their choices. Yeah. And now it's your moment for mentimeter.com and see which are the concrete activities and actions that you are providing and feeding this conference with.
You can see the code there on screen. You can submit, it says questions because we're using a mechanism for upvoting. Once people submit their ideas, you can also click and vote for other ideas that you like so that they will be prioritized. We encourage you to send us in your specific ideas about things you can do in schools. There's a dual objective to this activity. On the one hand, this is a sharing space where we will legitimately embody the idea of crowdsourcing, of learning from one another. And no less important, we will have our voices heard. This is a legitimate expression of some of the most committed teachers in our schools, and the collective voice of our teachers who want to do this in their schools is going to be heard through this activity. So please, we encourage you to send in your specific ideas. And I'll be scrolling as you do.
Offering Choice has got already 4 likes, 5, 7. I think that in a few months they're going to rub out the likes in WhatsApp, is it? Or so let's use them today. Disruption, I don't understand that one, disruption as an active.
Yeah, we need to be very specific about our ideas.
Yes.
Okay.
By the end of the conference, all this information will be gathered and you will be able to share it. So you will have your own concrete ideas, plus the speakers, plus others. kindergarten, redefining assessment, teachers as facilitators, self-esteem, collaborative learning, students give opportunities to express themselves, I guess disruption is about activities that change the pace of the classroom or something innovative. Okay, and we have 4 votes so that we don't have any more desks. Planning. You can use menti.com if you want to in the classroom.
Okay, I think we can.
We continue with the
to
next
to
question.
next one, yes.
Great. So
Thank
the next question, and this goes for Judy, is how would failure, how would learning from mistakes, from failure, and doing away with fear look like in the classroom? Which could be concrete actions in which we can really put in the picture mistake as something that it's okay and all right?
My sense is we can go back to the kindergarten model, where little kids, they get up, they try to walk, they fall down. They're not ashamed, they're not embarrassed. They get up, giggle, and try it again. We start learning to be embarrassed. We start getting messages that people are judging us. So in a situation of continuing communication from teacher to teacher as year goes on, from parent to teacher, and from student to teachers, instead of the transcript following them and just their standardized tests and their disciplinary actions, the things that we find from our kid watching. What are their strengths? What picks them up when they're down? What are their interests? And absolutely modeling our own mistakes and pointing out the essential value of learning. If you already know something so well that you don't make mistakes, then you're not learning anything. The only time you're learning is when you don't already know it. That means going from not knowing something to knowing something, or knowing something better. If there are no mistakes along the line, you're wasting your time. Mistakes are the pathway to learning. It shows you are actively learning. And that message to learners, and a simple thing from teachers, avoiding the word the. What is the answer? On tests and questions. And even if it sounds that way, not stopping and saying, what else?
I love the example that you talked about individual response tools as a way of responding, keeping. Could you tell the audience, because not all of them, you were able to choose 2 speakers. So maybe some of you couldn't reach Judy's breakout session. And she talked about individual response tools. Could you tell them about them?
Sure. And thank you for those who are being patient and hearing this again. But it's the one thing that I would change. If someone said to you, keep this in mind, what is the one thing I can do tomorrow? Bless you all for tomorrow going back to class. But what is the one thing you could do tomorrow that would make the biggest difference without a whole lot of effort? My answer to that is individual response tools. We talked about how the brain likes to make predictions. It enjoys that because it knows that maybe it's going to get some feedback that it's right and get some dopamine. But what stops it from making predictions is other people will say the answer, or people will hear what they say and it will be wrong. So individual response tools take advantage of each brain getting to think, getting to grow its dendrites, getting to evaluate information, And when the opening of a class starts with the teacher brings a bird into the room, what's that doing here? So students are asked, why do you think? Whatever the question is, or the curiosity is, or the excitement is, each student gets to make their individual prediction instead of hearing one person. So it could be as simple as a little whiteboard, as fingers up independently, but a way for each student to individually make their prediction without having to worry that others see or that they'll be wrong. And that brain, if their brain is invested that they get to make a prediction without it going to someone else, that brain is on, and that brain is listening. And especially if they can hold up their whiteboard or their magic pad or click it in later. So their first thought may have been one they, not that was wrong, but that they want to change. That's life. So if you have a clicker or a whiteboard or a magic pad, make a prediction, hold it up, teacher sees it, and then as the learning goes on, because the brain now wants to know, hey, was I right? Could I change it? Do so. Revision. That's real life. It's individual, and only the brain that gets to predict and think grows the dendrites. So don't deprive any learner of their chance to make a prediction safely.
Thank you. Will?
If I was going to target one thing to change in the classroom and the school, to encourage that kind of courageous, risk-taking, independent, adventuresome attitude, I would probably pick how we give praise and feedback. In essence, I'm going to put a lot of work down to 3 words here. If I was going to praise something, I would go for effort, strategy, and practice. To praise or feedback on those things. To avoid praising them as a fixed thing, a fixed person. So, and parents, the blood leaves their face when I say this to them. I said, do you ever say to your kids, you're very clever? And they go, oh yes, like this. And I said, maybe that's not such a good thing to do. And they, why? Because they are, at least, and this is drawing on the extensive research from Carol Dweck and the growth mindset thing, of course. If you praise them as a person, as a fixed thing, and said, you're very clever, you're very capable, you're the cream, you're going places, you're giving them a repeated message that you are up there. That's what you are. So you're at this high level. And of course, there's no learning without struggle and failure and difficulty. But very often, a child who's been told, you're very clever, feels that I shouldn't struggle because I'm clever. I shouldn't get things wrong. They tend to be perfectionists, or what I call the brittle bright. They seem to score very well, but my God, they're so frightened of making mistakes and learning properly. So they've been told they're up there. A good teacher gets them in the pit, gives them challenge, where they will make mistakes, because that's where you learn. So they've got 2 messages coming in. They think I'm up there, but inside, self-esteem going south, I realize they've got me wrong. I'm actually down here. I'm not as able as they think I am. And this is the imposter syndrome again. You feel a fake. People think I'm up there. I know actually I'm down here because I'm making a lot of mistakes in here. So this can cause a great deal of anxiety and failure aversion and perfectionism and stress and, squirting the cortisol into the amygdala and making them learning averse. So by praising effort, strategy, and practice, I'm drawing the attention to how they're making improvements, how they're making a difference to the learning, rather than what they are as a person. And that they can change, that can grow. This is fantastic elastic, this can change, this grows through use and exercise. So have a policy, having an agreement as a school. When we praise, we're going to praise the kind of strategy they're using. I love the way you found a new way of doing that. The effort they're putting into it. Goodness me, you kept going when that got difficult. Well done. And the process, talk about the methods that they're going to use and what they're planning to do and how they're using them. It's not, however, just about the effort. I think Carol Dweck's has been misinterpreted in that way. It's all about the effort. It's not. I could make a marvelous effort to get through that wall with my head. So it's about effort and strategy, knowing when to give up as well, when to find another route or take a different target. So praise is the first thing I'd go for. In fact, you could even ask the question whether to praise at all. Give feedback, yeah, but I would take that even further. Does praise actually take things down as a learner? It's just a provocative question. There are other things you can do, loads of other things. For example, learning warrior of the week. Who's that? Oh, I like that. That's going to happen. Warriors get bruised, thumped, dirty and smelly, but the thing about warriors is they keep going. So have that as a celebrated person. Who won that award? You can do that with 3- and 4-year-olds. I did this in South Korea with a school, and they had a little ninja teddy bear. And this got awarded to the Learning Warrior of the Week, and the kid had to take the teddy bear home to the parents. What a great way of getting that message home. Hey, why have you brought this bear home? Oh, I'm Learning Warrior of the Week. What's that about? I'll tell you. I was brave, I was courageous, I was tough when it got... So, where possible, again, involve the parents, communicate this. In an average school hour, you get 25% of a child's waking year. I know, it can feel like eternity, but it's only 25% of their waking year. 75% is spent elsewhere, usually with parents. So you may be giving them all of these great growth mindset, language and praise and open-minded, and then they're going home and they could be hearing well-intentioned messages that saying, you're fit, you're a natural at maths. So they're getting mixed messages there. They're getting kind of fixed mindset messages from home, lovely growth mindset messages at school, if and when possible. And I know it's tricky sometimes, but can you communicate this stuff to parents? When I run parent sessions with schools, the difference that can make is enormous to get that support, that daily drip, drip, drip message of that growth mindset approach from home as well as school. Final points I make, maybe emphasize that tests are for learning, not for judgment. That we're doing a test to see where are we at the moment, so we know what our next steps are. It's not, here's a verdict about what you are. So I would talk about tests for learning. And Guy indeed mentioned it earlier on. Getting 20 out of 20 doesn't mean anything. And parents are hungry for that, aren't they? They're very sneaky. They know this. They sidle up to you and they ask questions like, where are they in the class? And you're going, they're coming first. And they go to their wife, darling, we can stop the tutors. Don't worry, they're coming first. And then I add, they're in a class of morons. Or they're coming 22nd. They're pretty much bottom of the class, but they're surrounded by Einsteins. Comparing yourself to others and getting full marks means nothing. The only real thing that matters is personal bests. Compared to what I could do last time, have I made progress? That's the only criterion you should judge on. So I'd have a praise policy and discussion in the classroom about how did you beat that? So it's the failure in a test is going to inform me about where I need to go next. It's not, this is what you are. There's the first 5 of a list of 30, but try some of those, they work.
Thank you. We've got quite concrete actions. James, I imagine if there is an activity such as reading, where you have to connect with trial and error and failure and feel good and continue, is reading. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no, I think it's one of those areas where effort and practice reinforces itself. But I think the minute you start framing it, reading especially in terms of being a test or an exam or there are right or wrong answers, you automatically have kind of failed with the point of reading. You know, when we're adults and we read and we choose to read, we don't do lots of the behaviours around reading that we do at school. You know, when we sit down to read our book in bed before we go to sleep, we don't turn to our partner and suggest a prediction of what we're going to do next and what's going to happen next. We don't summarise it to the person sitting next to us. We don't answer questions about it. Reading isn't a competitive activity. I don't think it's possible really to be better at reading than someone else. Once you can read, you follow your own paths and you read your own things. I've got one kind of practical thing, if you don't mind, which is from when I was a teacher, which I think is a useful thing in terms of learning from failure, and maybe is a useful thing in terms of just dealing with the bumps that are sometimes put in our way by the powers that be, people higher up the food chain. So I worked at a school that was part of a group of schools, and they decided that they would introduce from 7 to 11 a termly test. And the test would be in reading and in writing and in maths and in science. And all the children across all the schools would do this test. It was a huge waste of time. But what we would do is we thought, well, if we're going to have this test and we have to do it, we're going to try and do as much good with it as we can. So there were two decisions we did. The first thing is, once the children had done it, we took it away from them and we analysed it and thought, okay, these are the things that most of them are pretty good at. These are the things that they aren't good at. We'll use that to inform our teaching. So therefore, it becomes a practical thing. That's the obvious thing, and I think every school does that. The second thing we said is we would always say to the children, that's your first go. So you've had your first go at the test, we'll collect those in, get the scores and send them off to whoever wants to know about them. Then always, with every assessment we ever gave children, we'd always give it back to them and say, right, there's your test back, sit with your friend, get full marks. And they would have an hour to sit down with their friend with whatever resources they wanted, whether it was the computer, whether it was someone they knew in the class who was really good at that little thing, and they sat together till everyone in the class had one in front of them that said 30 out of 30. And I know, that's not a snapshot judgment of how good they are, but they left the classroom A thinking, brilliant, I can do this, I can get 30. Plus, the process of sitting with their friend and working through, they learnt loads. And it was often stuff they wouldn't admit to me they didn't know, but they would sort of sit with someone and say, what, 7 nines again? Oh yeah, brilliant, right, stick that in. What do you do with that? Oh yeah, move it across. So I can't kind of get to every single child, every single session, but together they could do, and they would all kind of leave a mile high. So that's my practical tip for something that's worked really well for me.
Thank you. So we go to Mentimeter and see if you can provide with concrete actions and to the pool of ideas.
While we load the next dinner activity, okay, we have answers already. While I was made aware by one of the members of the audience, and I need to clarify this, a distinguished member of the audience, that our second question yesterday, the gap, we used this same mechanism, which is a little confusing and may have led to you asking more questions. So I apologize for that comment before. You did send us questions because it was a little confusing. The reason we use this mechanism is that it's the only one that allows for upvoting. It's the only one that allows for prioritizing. So we not only use it to ask questions, but we also use it for concrete suggestions like now. So the reason why we may have received a lot of questions for the gap was that we use this type of activity. So now this is your chance to address specifically, like when you say eliminate teacher desks, as specifically, as concretely as possible, what we can do in order to try to minimize this learning from failure issue, the stigma of failure, of fear in the classroom.
There are many votes for metacognitive processes. Students leading lessons. Disruption again. Self-esteem. Attention. Respecting opinions. Again, the desk. We're going to leave the desk for the next question. Standardized exams, no standardized exams. There is a lot about conversation, dialogue, peer group, group work. Teachers as facilitators. Shall we go to question 3? And the third and last question is about movement. And which concrete activities could we think of to just start next week as regards the use of spaces? How can we redefine spaces, and what actions can we take if we consider the movement of people and furniture and spaces can help active learning? Judy, what do you think about this? About learning space? Or maybe any one of you who's already got an idea about how movement and the definition of spaces, how we use learning environments could really foster active learning.
Yes, and I will take it back to my friend dopamine and recognize that this is the biologic system we have, and the brain will buy in when it recognizes the two factors, a challenge and how it's achievable, because when it achieves a challenge, it gets this great feeling of pleasure, satisfaction, more motivation to persevere through failures, to take greater risks, to innovate, to create, to change. So watching and individualizing as much as possible to provide the choices, to provide the resources, the media, the text, the flexibility, so that each student has a pathway where they recognize, I can get there. This not necessarily through the same method, but my teacher believes I can. They're giving me choices of how to. If I fail in one modality, that's not the only right way to do it. So I'm comfortable moving along. And one of the things we will see when students are comfortable with selecting their pathway, what's achievable for me, and a challenge, we'll see them asking more questions and asking for more help. Not, oh, I don't understand, or is this right? But, oh, so is this possible? What about this way to do it? Now we're bringing them back to being in control of their learning, recognizing how their effort is in charge of their progress, and recognizing their potential and their interest, how they can best learn. What did I learn? What made me successful? That metacognition, and part of that is the opportunity for revision on a test, on a paper, on a sporting event. Okay, that wasn't the right way to do it. Okay, giving them a chance to think about, to write about, what would I do differently next time, and then providing the opportunity to do it again and get more feedback. That's what we all do in life. That's how I learned surgery and neurology. What did I do wrong? What would I do differently next time? And yes, here's another chance.
Thank you.
Two suggestions. One is kind of general with an example, and then the second one is going to be kind of funky and conceptual. So the first one, in terms of space and active learning, I would suggest the idea of having each school having a golden lesson a week. And I mentioned this to some of you earlier on. A golden lesson is not a lesson in which things go brilliantly. A golden lesson is simply a lesson in which you take a risk with how you normally do stuff. And let's say it's Wednesday, period 2, everybody has got to take a risk. And it might just be 3 minutes of a lesson. It might be an activity you've never tried before, and you're just going to give it a go. Dive in, give it a go. It might be halving your average talk time to see what would happen to responsibility, ownership, and independence. Would less talk time from you change that at all? You're going to go and find out. It might be, and this is where the physical space might come in, just experimenting with, what if I change the arrangement of these seats and where genders sit in relation to each other? So it's not to predict what's going to happen necessarily, it's an experiment to find out. In philosophy for children, if we have a specific example from this idea of golden lesson, in philosophy for children, where possible, we sit in a circle, and the facilitator will sit equally with everyone else, so that practically we can see and hear each other. No one is talking to the back of a head. And there's a sense of equality. You know, none of us is, you know, if I'm standing like this, I'm clearly the authority. And if I throw the question out, I ask a pupil and their answer comes back to me. And it goes back out and it comes back to me. And it goes out and it comes back to me. I've got 50% of the talk time. And then you've got 15 or 20 or 30 children trying to grab the remaining minutes. So I would rather sit equally with everyone and encourage them over time to communicate directly with each other, not through me all the time. And the sitting, in terms of space and practice, sitting as a circle helps with that. So you could add little rules like, okay, we're going to have a dialogue, but the next person to speak is chosen by the last person to speak, not the teacher. And rather than all of this hyperventilating yoga that can happen, that's not helpful for thinking. So keep it very calm, just have an open hand on the knee. I'd like to speak. And the last person to speak, only when they've finished can hands be put out. You can't say, I want to speak before they've finished. So you can change that a little bit. You can have an open hand, and with the other hand, you can say a thumb up, I'd like to agree with you, and I'd like to say why, or I'm not sure about what you said, or thumb down, I'd like to disagree with you. So you can get agreement, disagreement, and uncertainty into the play of the dialogue. But the circle is the thing that allows that. You know, it's having that space of equality and communicating directly with each other, not staring at the teacher going, what do you want me to say? So that might be an idea for the space and the arrangement and how it changes the feeling of communication. I think the slightly spacey conceptual suggestion, this is just, you know, a little thought bomb to play with, is the idea of inner space. So there's the physical environment is out there. What would it mean to increase the inner space of the child in terms of their inner landscape and how they feel and how open and refreshing and spacious it feels within them, or how closed and tensed and shut down they feel? And part of that story of opening that inner space within them, feeling like there's my own experience of my body and my mind is a sort of free mountain breeze feeling. It's not a fearful, tense thing. Part of that is creating a really good, caring dynamic in the classroom where people really love and respect and support each other rather than trying to judge and put down or bring fear or timidity into the classroom. So I don't know, it's just struck me now really. Is that another way of thinking about how I want a child to be? I want them to have big, open, spacious, inner sense of being in this classroom rather than something contracted. And then perhaps just have a golden lesson with that. Okay, in this golden lesson, I'm going to see if I can open that space up in all of them. And how would I tell that's worked? So the practical and the slightly wacky there, but play with it, see where it goes.
I think it's, let's see.
And there we go, hooray. I should have learnt by now, for every question, la la la. So I've got two kind of practical ones, both from schools that I've been to visit recently that I thought were amazing. So one was a school, I think it was called St Matthews, in fact it was, and they had a wonderful thing. So they felt kind of quite constrained by their curriculum. They had a national curriculum, they had to follow it, to do all the bits and pieces on it, but they wanted just a little tiny bit of wiggle room. So they decided that what they would do is for one term out of the 3 a year, on a Wednesday afternoon, they would suspend the normal curriculum and they would introduce St Matthew's University. And this was a primary school, but the children would attend St Matthew's University. And any adult in the school that felt that they could offer tuition on a subject at St Matthew's University, whether it was linked to school teaching or anything else, they could do. So there were teachers that loved sewing at home, but didn't get the chance to ever sew with the children. There was one of the PE coaches who was a really good cook. There was somebody who wasn't a PE teacher but loved rugby, and so on and so on. So they offered on a great big board a selection of different choices, and any child that wanted to could sign up for their top 3 choices, and then they would sift them all round. So I think it was one of the teachers who normally taught the 11-year-olds who ran a film club on a Wednesday afternoon, and they watched a film and then had these conversations about it. So the children could follow their interests. The teachers got to teach one thing that they really, really loved that was outside of their area. Because it was quite a small amount of time, they still covered the rest of the curriculum, and suddenly the children got to kind of see, well, this is what it's like when you're at university. I'm going to go to university because I get to study whatever I want to study. So it seemed like such a nice little way of just carving a bit of time to do something that's good and joyful. And sometimes that's reason enough to do something in education. The second one, I suppose, is about actually moving and shuffling children about. I've been to visit a couple of schools that have a system called reading buddies. So rather than always reading with a teacher, always reading with the same adult, everybody in the school is allocated a reading buddy. And once upon a time in the week, so maybe, for 20 minutes on a Wednesday morning, everyone gets up, shuffles off and goes and finds their reading buddy. And sometimes their reading buddy is an adult, sometimes it's a teacher or a support staff member, sometimes it's a parent volunteer, sometimes it's another child. And they sit down with their reading buddy and they enjoy a book together. And they choose who reads to each other, and they listen and they share it and they enjoy it. And it's a great way of kind of doing different things and having this little bit of special time. As you might have a teacher that teaches older children who gets to meet for a whole term, once a week, someone else who really likes Marvel books, and they sit down and share one together, and everyone looks forward to it. That's one model of doing it, which has seemed really, really nice. And the children that don't get that reading at home get it with someone at school. Another school did the same sort of thing, and this is the last thing I'll say, and they decided that they got their year 5s, their 10-year-olds, and once a week they would go down and read with year 2, who are 6 and 7. And they would go and sit down with them, and they would hear them read, and they would share a book together. And they noticed that the younger children benefited it from hugely, because they get ready to read with this older child, and they wanted to impress them, and they're all excited to see them, and it gave them a friend that they'd wave to around as they walked around the school. So they loved it. But they also noticed the older children got loads out of it, because they were responsible. They were suddenly the teacher. Once a week, they were responsible for someone else's reading, and they loved to choose just the right book to share with their reading buddy, and so on and so on. So I thought this works brilliantly for both age groups. I wonder what would happen if we got our year 2s to go down to reception, to our 4-year-olds. How would that work? So again, they tried that out for a term, and again, it worked brilliantly. The younger children loved reading to an older child. The older child loved reading to a younger child, and it worked really brilliantly. So they thought, well, I wonder what would happen if we got our reception, our 4-year-olds, to go down to the nursery once a week and read with them. So I was there on the day they did it. It is the best thing I have ever seen in any school ever, guaranteed. So there's a load of nursery children sat on the carpet with their books, waiting, like watching the door. And in walked reception, these 5-year-olds, and they were about a mile high. And they strutted in, scooped up their little child, sat them down. Often there wasn't much difference in the reading level between the two children, but it didn't matter. They were just kind of piecing together a story together. But for these 4 and 5-year-olds to be kind of responsible for somebody else and to feel like they're kind of grown up, you can't buy that anywhere else in the curriculum. So those would be my kind of 2 practical, useful things that I've seen that are handy.
Inner spaces, sharing with others, spaces with others, large groups, small groups, learning spaces, outdoors, indoors. These are their ideas. Now, mentimeter.com, which are yours. spaces
As we
outside the
browse,
classroom.
sorry Silvana, as we browse through the final questions and we get your input, all of these answers in their prioritized order will be on the blog as from tomorrow, together with all the materials from the conference, including summaries of the talks, some of the personality insights. As you can tell, all of your suggestions are pulled together. So once again, we empower you to go back to your respective environments, to your schools, and disseminate this information, head teachers, coordinators, teachers, educators at large. This is the voice of the educators in our schools who have chosen to commit to coming for a two-day conference on their weekend. It is a legitimate representative voice of all these things that can be done in our schools as from tomorrow. And the challenge that awaits us is how we make it happen. No, Silvana?
Especially the speakers. I believe that one thing is to prepare yourself and come to a conference and deliver your area of expertise. But these speakers, and including Guy Claxton, who's now, I think, on the plane, leaving, they had really to stretch themselves. What we proposed to them was, okay, a keynote, safe ground, but after that, working on the ideas that you generated and having these information coming through a different, I would say, input, trying to adapt and repeating that with another group, with another kind of input. And it really takes a lot of risk for speakers who could really safely deliver their area of expertise. So I especially want to thank Judy, Will, and James, because James, you didn't fight or have to work with software, but you accepted to be in the panel, right? And you said, let's go for it. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for that effort. And thank you for stretching yourselves, for being there for a new learning. In fact, thank you for really accepting to work in a new software never used in the type of activities that we delivered. I want to thank you, Gabriel, for all the effort, all the back work you did. And I am going to ask the speakers to stay on stage and invite our chair to close the ceremony, to start the closing ceremony, in fact.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. You have lots of energy for tomorrow, I hope, when we go back to our schools. Yes? No, it's been wonderful. A great day and a half. Thanks to ESOP, okay? Denise, Paula, Silvana, you worked so hard with your team. They don't want to come to the stage, but all the girls and guys that have got this conference together have helped us with every single logistic situation, helping you right from the early days when you actually signed up for it right until the last Combe or bus or car has driven home today. A great job. So can you give a big round of applause, please, for all the ESOP team. I am reaching the twilight of my teaching career, but listening to this, to all these wonderful speakers, and being with you and seeing young kindergarten teachers enthusiastically going off tomorrow, and some more senior teachers getting enthusiastic, it really, and this is not a cliche, it really makes me feel like I wish I was starting all over again with these new ideas, because the way I was taught how to teach are very different. I'm trying to be adaptable, I think I am. But I just want to go back into the classroom now and do all these wonderful things. So thanks for setting sparks alive in all of us. That's great. And we've got a little memento that I'd like the girls to present to Judy and Will and James, and to Richard as well. Could Richard come to the stage, please? And thank you very, very much for coming. We hope you enjoyed Argentina. Great job. Is Richard here? Has Richard gone home as well? You guys do it. Okay, Denise will present something to Judy. Thank you very much, Judy.
Such a pleasure having you here again.
Paola has something for Will, I guess. Yes, there we go. Thank you. And Silvana has James's gift. Remembrance by. No, I've asked him 3 times. I guess he's having a cup of coffee. Well, anyway, thank you, Richard, as well. And I'm going to ask in a moment Andrew Combe, who's representing our main sponsor, Cambridge Assessment International Examinations, to come and just to close the conference. And afterwards, we're going to see a video. All the pictures you've seen our famous photographer take. He's now been putting them together, and there will be a little display for you to see, which will be a nice reminder of the whole event. And then Silvana's going to round off. I think there's a raffle and a few technical details that Silvana will finish off with. So I now introduce you to Andrew, please, to close the show. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ian. Hello. I can't see you here. So I'm Andrew Combe. I'm responsible for the international network in Cambridge International. And it's been a great pleasure to come and join you at your conference. It's been a really fantastic conference. So first of all, I would just like to say thank you to a few people. To Ian and also the rest of the executive committee for inviting us here. I would also like to say thank you to Denise Enright, to Paola Corti, Silvana Tejon, and the whole of the ESAP team for a fantastic conference. Well done to all of you. And last but not least, I would just like to thank all of you, school leaders, teachers, who've given up your weekend to come here for your professional development. It's great to see you all. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm sure you have. And I'm sure that we will all have a few things to take away. So at Cambridge, we believe that the curriculum, the teaching and learning, and the assessment all work together. And what we can try and add to that is recognition of our qualifications around the world and a global community. And I'm fortunate enough to get the chance to see how we work and how our schools work in lots of different contexts. So some of the things that have been, that I've seen over this weekend are really interesting. They're different, but they show how the flexibility of what we do with you can work in many different contexts. And we believe that it's up to you, the school leaders, the teachers, to design how you want to use our programs, our qualifications. It's up to you to develop your own curriculum for the school, and we just give you the tools that help you to do that. And we've heard a lot about some of the skills, some of the things that we want our students to be like, and we absolutely believe in developing higher order thinking skills. And I wanted to mention our Global Perspectives course, because from some of the comments that I've had, it's clear that not everyone is aware of this. So this is something that really helps to make the students protagonists. It's available right from the early years through the primary, lower secondary, upper secondary and advanced program, and it really puts the students in control of what they are going to do. It encourages problem solving, critical thinking, independent research, collaboration, and problem solving, and also how to put arguments together. And importantly, there is no curriculum. It's up to the students to decide how they're going to interpret and employ this. So, when I hear sometimes that, Cambridge is all about assessments and rigid programs, it's not true. And I'd encourage any of you who don't know about global perspectives to talk to any of us, not least to Lucila Marquez or Annick Blanchard, who'd be very happy to tell you more. So I also wanted to just give you some personal reflections on what I've heard over the last couple of days. Guy Claxton encouraged us to think about developing active learning and a growth mindset. He talked about resilience and independent thinking. And it sounded very much like the Cambridge learner attributes that we're trying to instill in all of our students. Confidence, responsible, innovative, reflective and engaged students. And I heard Will talk a lot about the value of questions and also made an impression on me, this idea of willing attention, which I think is really valuable. And also, personal reflection. I was in the session yesterday afternoon when we had the game with poison, and we had a good laugh. So, and many of you will have enjoyed that as well. And Judy, you taught me about dopamines. I didn't know anything about dopamines before. I know a little bit now. You talked about achievable challenges, and that was really interesting. And for me personally, you re-engaged a long-lost and very small interest from my school days in physics. So thank you for that. I also went to Richard Gilby's session this morning about leadership, and a couple of takeouts for me there were the idea of giving people trust and how powerful that can be, but also taking time to observe colleagues and give them feedback. It's again this idea of willing attention as well, I think. And I was interested in how you have used technology in this conference, some really innovative and interesting things that you've done with technology here. And I think what's interesting for me is what we can learn from how technology is being used and how it's going to develop. What's also interesting for me is it's not all about the technology. We know that the technology is not perfect yet, not everything works, but there's also an element of culturally, how do we interact with technology? How do we change our behavior to use technology? If, for example, I'm going to write my notes and they become public and everyone can see them, that's going to have an impact on the kind of notes I write. I might want to be a little bit less rude about some of the speakers, perhaps. So it's interesting to see how that's going to challenge us as we go forward. And finally, I just wanted to say something about the organisation of the conference itself and the things that will probably stay with me longer than anything. I can tell you that the ESAP conference is famous around the world, and ESAP is known for throwing a good party. And thank you. You really threw a great party last night. I really enjoyed it. So thank you very much for that. And a couple of people said to me during the party, oh, we are serious. We are serious educators. It's okay. And of course we are too, but we're also human beings. And one of the things that I think is really important is that we have fun together. We will remember that. I will remember that. It makes it easier for us to collaborate, to talk to each other, to learn and to help each other. And I think those shared experiences are great for team building, for building new friendships, but also for building trust. So for that, I thank you very much indeed. So yeah, that's that's it. Thank you very much indeed. It's been a great pleasure to come here.